No one ever imagined that a rock legend could almost die because of a gun hidden in his own boots. But that was Dusty Hill, the quiet, thunder-low bass of ZZ Top. The man who once drove himself to the hospital with a bullet lodged deep in his stomach, all because of one careless moment in the neon glare of the 1980s. That accident didn't just leave a scar, it revealed who he truly was: strong, calm, and far more enduring than any rock star image the media ever tried to paint. For over 50 years, Dusty Hill never stood in the spotlight. He stood beneath it, holding the band steady with bass lines as precise as the tick of a clock. Few people know he dropped out of school, hid behind airport jobs even while he was already famous, was called odd for loving black blues music, and eventually passed away in his sleep after leaving the world with one final heartbreaking request: let the show go on. This isn't just the story of a bassist. It's the story of a life that grew in silence, yet left an echo that will never fade. And to understand how a man could calmly drive himself to the hospital with a still hot bullet in his stomach, we have to go back to where everything began, 1950s Texas, where Dusty Hill grew up amid the harsh paradoxes of an era filled with opportunity yet heavy with prejudice. He was born into a modest working-class family in East Dallas, a neighborhood far from wealthy, where toughness was considered essential for survival. In such a place, artistic souls were rarely understood, and children who were different were constantly scrutinized. Dusty, a long-haired boy obsessed with blues music, belonged to that minority. In the conservative white communities of the time, a child who loved the music of black artists was not just unusual, it was unwelcome. Kids mocked him, adults eyed him with suspicion, and school was never a refuge. But that very rejection tightened his bond with the melodies his mother played on their old radio. The only thing that made him feel allowed to be himself. Music came to Dusty like a lifeline in a spinning current. By the age of 8, he was already on stage, not searching for fame, but earning money for the family and finding shelter in a world filled with judgment. By 13, Dusty was performing in smoky night bars, places where a Dallas teenager could easily witness violence, drunkenness, and trouble. It was his first real-world classroom, the place where the bass taught him to stay quiet in the face of chaos and shaped the stage discipline he carried for the rest of his life. At school, Dusty was an outsider. He hated rules, hated homework, hated the feeling of being locked into a system that didn't belong to him. Grades never reflected his passion, and eventually, he dropped out while still very young. It wasn't reckless rebellion, it was self-preservation, a way to pull himself off a path he knew would suffocate the one part of him still alive, the artist inside that boy from Dallas. Fortunately, he wasn't alone. His older brother, Rocky Hill, fiery, impulsive, but immensely talented, became his most important companion. Garage rock sessions, living rooms, backyards, parking lots. They were all rehearsal rooms for the two brothers. Rocky was the one who taught Dusty how to play bass, brought him into his first bands, and helped him stay grounded through the chaotic years of early adulthood. That bond, tense yet sacred, became the foundation for the musical road Dusty would walk for the next 5 decades. And amid a Dallas filled with dust, poverty, and prejudice, only one thing grew beside him with unwavering resilience: the blues. The very music that had been dismissed in the place he was born, but would later become the backbone of rock history and the soul that shaped Dusty Hill. And from that collision-filled childhood, Dusty stepped into the 1960s with only one real option: music, even though that path was anything but easy in Texas. He and Rocky Hill, along with drummer Frank Beard, formed American Blues, a band that was unlike anything around them. Blue dyed hair, a sound that fused raw blues with rebellious psychedelic rock, a style too wild for the South and far too crazy for Dallas's conservative tastes. In a place where cowboy boots and traditional rock and roll defined what was acceptable, American blues was dismissed as a bunch of misfits with no future. But in those smoke-filled, chaotic bars, they gained something no school could ever teach: stage instincts. Dusty didn't learn bass out of passion, but out of necessity. The band needed someone, and Rocky pointed directly at him. From a kid who barely knew how to hold the instrument properly, Dusty was forced to adapt, playing, watching, absorbing, enduring the sneers of drunken customers. That fear of being embarrassed if he played poorly sharpened him into the near-perfectly precise bassist he later became. But American blues didn't last long. Rocky wanted to return to pure, traditional blues, while Dusty and Beard wanted to push the music further, louder, heavier, more modern. When the band dissolved, they lost more than a stage. They lost everything. No record deal, no backing, no safety net. Staying in Dallas meant stagnation. Leaving could mean the end of their careers. Dusty and Frank Beard chose the riskier path. They sold everything they could, scraped together a small amount of cash, grabbed their instruments, and boarded an old Greyhound bus to Houston, the only place they believed they might rebuild from zero. It wasn't a glorious journey, nor a promising one, but it was the only road left that kept their dream alive. And in Houston, destiny began to shift. When Billy Gibbons, fresh from the breakup of Moving Sidewalks and searching for a new rhythm section, met Dusty and Beard, everything clicked instantly. Dusty's bass, Beard's razor-sharp drums, and Gibbons's swagger-fueled guitar locked together in a way that felt uncanny, as if they'd been playing together their whole lives. No elaborate auditions, no grand promises, just music, pure Texas style, heavy, gritty, snarling, and instinctive. From that moment, ZZ Top was born. And from here on, Dusty Hill's story was no longer just the journey of a poor kid from Dallas. It was the story of a man who would help build one of the most stable, enduring, and quietly brilliant bands in American rock history. The bass he once learned out of obligation would become the backbone of legendary albums. The years spent in dingy bars would become the battle-tested discipline that kept him steady through every storm. And that desperate Greyhound ride would become the first ingredient in what allowed ZZ Top to survive every music industry upheaval, even the MTV mass extinction of the 1980s that nearly swallowed them whole. That Greyhound bus didn't just carry a young musician, it carried a piece of history in the making. And Dusty Hill, though he didn't know it as he curled up on that night ride, was stepping into a journey that would change his life and redefine the sound of America. In 1971, ZZ Top's first album was released. The music was raw, dusty, soaked in the breath of Texas, as if highway dust and cigarette smoke had seeped into every note. Dusty sang backing vocals and took lead on several tracks, not to show off, but to stay true to the spirit of Southern blues rock. Honest, unpolished, and unafraid of showing its scars. Then came Tres Hombres, 1973, and everything exploded in ways no one expected. Grange, a song about the legendary Chicken Ranch brothel, became a classic hit. Its magic didn't lie in complexity, but in Dusty's bass line anchoring the entire track like a taut rope, pulling the band together. It was the kind of playing that never called attention to itself but made it impossible for listeners to stay still. The album sold 500,000 copies in its first year, launching ZZ Top from dusty bar stages into the ranks of the South's most important rock acts. But that early success didn't make these three men, all born from hardship, complacent. They pushed themselves further, harder, and by 1976-77, ZZ Top embarked on the worldwide Texas tour, one of the most iconic tours of the 1970s. 97 shows, 1.2 million tickets sold, $10 million in revenue, numbers most bands of the era could only dream about. But what made the tour legendary wasn't just the music. ZZ Top turned Texas into a full cultural product. Cowboy hats, belts, logos, Southern town imagery, trucks decorated in cowboy style, all rolled into a massive merchandising system, sparking a revolution in how rock bands branded themselves. For Dusty Hill, this era was both dazzling and heavy. Night after night, he had to hold the band's rhythm steady through marathon performances, all while trying to stay grounded amid a success that was growing too fast, too big. But his quiet presence, his persistence in every bass note, his stability in the rush for fame, is what helped ZZ Top not only thrive, but survive a decade that swallowed countless other bands. Yet, after the bright lights of the worldwide Texas tour, ZZ Top didn't ease into a new chapter. They slammed into a wall of exhaustion. By late 1977, Frank Beard had fallen so deeply into addiction that he could no longer tour, and the band was forced to stop. For three men who had spent their entire youth on the road, that sudden silence felt like a punch to the chest. While most bands would have pushed forward regardless of the cost, ZZ Top disappeared entirely from the music map for 3 years. A hiatus from 1977 to 1980 that few understood and even fewer knew the pain behind. Each member tried to survive in his own way, and Dusty Hill chose the most unexpected path. He returned to Dallas and took a job at Dallas-Fort Worth Airport, working as a cargo handler and logistics staff. A rising Texas rock star suddenly became an anonymous laborer among thousands of passing travelers. Strangely, Dusty felt no shame. He called it a breather after years of living like a whirlwind. But that quiet period led to some half-comic, half-poignant moments fans still talk about. Occasionally, a passenger would recognize him. His face, his eyes, his unmistakable voice. And each time, Dusty would simply smile and shake his head. No, I'm not Dusty Hill. Not because he was embarrassed, but because he wanted to keep that rare piece entirely for himself. During this same period, Billy Gibbons retreated to Mexico, spending his days collecting vintage cars, reading books, and growing a beard. Ironically, both Dusty and Billy, though miles apart, let their beards grow long throughout the hiatus. When they reunited in 1979, their first look at each other sent the band into laughter. Two men who had never been style-conscious suddenly looked like Texas hermits with chest-length beards, a look that would later become ZZ Top's global trademark. But behind the laughter was a looming question. Could these three men stand together again? Did they still have the strength to step into rock's new era, an era in which MTV was rising like a storm? Dusty didn't know the answer then. But that comeback would not only save ZZ Top's career, it would rewrite the very rules of how a rock band survives in the age of image. When the 1980s arrived, music didn't simply change, it was replaced. MTV swept in like a cultural storm, wiping out every band that relied on sound more than image. Within 18 months, album sales from the 70s dropped by 40–50%. For blues rock groups like ZZ Top, that wasn't just a statistic, it was an ultimatum. Warner Brothers even sent a clear message. If you want to survive, shave the beards, change the look, and chase the new wave aesthetic dominating television. But Dusty Hill, the man who had stood in smoke-soaked bars since age 13, the man who once drove himself to a hospital with a bullet in his stomach, was not someone who sacrificed identity. ZZ Top refused everything, and instead of abandoning Texas blues to mimic Duran Duran or The Police, they chose a bolder path. They didn't change who they were. They changed how they appeared. They kept the beards, the hats, the Texas grit, but amplified them until they looked like characters straight out of a Southwestern graphic novel. At the same time, they quietly slipped into their music the elements Dusty had studied during the hiatus: synths, club beats, and the groove of 1980s dance floors. To complete the picture, they brought in young director Tim Newman and created a series of music videos structured like short films, with the red Ford Coupe Eliminator blazing through each scene like a hero. Gimme All Your Lovin', Sharp-Dressed Man, Legs were no longer just music videos. They were 4-minute stories people rewatched endlessly, waiting for the moment when the three long-bearded men appeared like modern-day Southern folk heroes. MTV played them nonstop, and ZZ Top became a part of American pop culture, not through sound, but through image. And once that image spread across the country, everything erupted. Eliminator didn't just sell well, it became an 11 million copy phenomenon, followed by a massive tour that generated tens of millions of dollars and an entire merchandise industry no blues rock band had ever imagined. Cowboy hats, belt buckles, posters, Eliminator car models, everything became collectible. The peak came in 1984, when Legs won Best Group Video at the MTV Video Music Awards, a moment that marked a complete overthrow of the old order. A long-bearded Texas trio had defeated an entire generation of artists built for television. Before the wave faded, Afterburner extended ZZ Top's MTV era by another 5 million copies, turning the trio into a $100 million empire, something no one thought a raw Southern blues band could ever achieve. And for Dusty, it wasn't just commercial success. It was living proof that a Dallas kid who once played bar gigs to escape hunger, who ran from bar fights, who was once labeled a dead end, now stood at the peak of pop culture through music he never betrayed. But the brighter the stage lights, the deeper the shadows behind them. And just as ZZ Top reached their peak, Dusty Hill entered a time when success was no longer a shield, a period when hidden wounds began knocking quietly, leaving marks no one could see. Entering the 1990s, as many rock giants collapsed under pressure, reinvention, internal conflict, commercial decline, ZZ Top chose to stand firm like three immovable stones against time. No breakup scandals, no dramatic split reunion, split again cycles like countless other bands. For decades, Dusty Hill, Billy Gibbons, and Frank Beard remained intact, a near miracle in rock history. That endurance became their most valuable invisible asset, something no record label could buy and no rival could replicate. Tours continued selling out from America to Europe, from stadiums to historic theaters, where audiences from multiple generations stood side by side to watch three long-bearded men still playing Texas riffs as if time had never passed. Trends shifted, grunge rose and fell, alternative rock came and went, yet ZZ Top held on to the one thing every era needs: uncompromising stability. They didn't chase trends, nor cling to nostalgia. They simply stayed themselves, and listeners always returned for that. Their crowning moment came in 2004, when ZZ Top was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. On that stage, Dusty Hill stood in a simple suit, wearing the quiet smile of a man who had spent a lifetime proving that endurance is its own form of glory. No grand gestures, no theatrics, just recognition for three artists who had forged one of the most unmistakable sounds in rock history. By the 2010s, as the music industry entered the streaming era and old catalogs became as valuable as gold, ZZ Top's name remained among the most prized treasures. That status was cemented in 2021 when the band's entire catalog, the musical legacy Dusty Hill contributed to on every album, was sold to BMG KKR for $50 million. A number that reflected not just commercial success, but the lasting life force behind three men once deemed too old, too bearded, too Texas. MTV had made ZZ Top icons, but behind the light were wounds only Dusty Hill carried, on his body and in his heart. The most dramatic came in 1984, a night that seemed ordinary, yet nearly cost him his life. After a show, his girlfriend pulled off his cowboy boot, and a small Derringer pistol slipped out. One light tap when it hit the floor. Bang. The bullet tore into Dusty's stomach before he could react. No screaming, no panic. He looked down at the blood spreading across his shirt, then quietly walked to his car. No ambulance, no help. Dusty drove himself through the night, half-conscious, as if pain could no longer intimidate someone who had lived his entire life inside toughness. Only upon reaching the ER did he fall into delayed shock. The doctors were stunned by his eerie calm. But the bullet wound was only one of many pains he silently endured. By the 2000s, Dusty's hips and shoulders were deteriorating after decades under the lights, carrying a heavy bass moving across thousands of stages. At many shows, Dusty had to sit while performing, an image that hurt fans, but revealed his unbreakable spirit. Even when he could barely stand, he plucked every note with near-perfect precision, as if the body could fail, but the rhythm never would. Yet his deepest pain didn't come from the body. It came from the silence of the audience. In ZZ Top, Billy Gibbons was the face, the spokesman, the camera magnet icon. Frank Beard stood out as the paradoxical only guy without a beard. And Dusty, the timekeeper, the low-end soul of the mix, became the shadow behind the two symbols. He once said a sentence that made the entire community of bassists fall silent. If the bass goes unnoticed, it means you're doing it right. It wasn't a complaint. It was the creed of an artist who accepted living in the dark to keep the band in the light. But that same philosophy made Dusty someone people looked through. Fans knew every riff of Grange, every bounce in Legs, every groove in Sharp-Dressed Man, yet rarely realized that the backbone holding all of it up was Dusty Hill's bass. He didn't complain, didn't ask for spotlight, never tried to steal Gibbons's mic. But over the years, that quietness turned into a unique kind of loneliness. The loneliness of someone who supports too well, so well that the world forgets nothing could stand without him. And it was within that silence that Dusty Hill created his most enduring legacy. A bass style that never demanded attention, never sought credit, yet kept the entire ZZ Top machine running for more than half a century. Steady, invisible, and never out of rhythm. And it was in that quiet stretch of life, between long tours, exhausted late-night shows, and the private silences Dusty always hid away from the public eye, that he met Charlene McCrory. Not at a glamorous celebrity party, not through industry connections. They met in Texas, simple and unexpected, as if life had finally decided to repay a man who had spent his entire existence standing behind the spotlight. Charlene was not someone easily swayed by fame. When she first met Dusty, she didn't see a legendary bassist from ZZ Top, didn't see the long beard or the rocker cowboy image recognized worldwide. She saw a soft-spoken man, slightly awkward when receiving attention, with gentle eyes that made her feel he was hiding a kind of exhaustion no one else could guess. That silence drew her in, not the silence of distance, but the silence of someone protecting something too fragile inside. Their first encounters unfolded just like that. Quiet, unannounced, two people finding a rare peace in each other's presence. To Charlene, Dusty wasn't a star. He was just a regular Texas man who listened well, laughed softly, and above all, cherished the calm she brought him. To Dusty, Charlene was like a rest note in a song that had gone on too long, a place where he could breathe, where he could become Joe Michael Hill again, not Dusty Hill of ZZ Top. Their affection grew naturally. No dramatic confessions, no extravagant gifts, no media following their every move. Just simplicity. Dinners together, evening walks, quiet conversations where Dusty shared stories he had never spoken to anyone. He told her about the fears of a conservative Texas childhood, the shame of playing poorly in his early bar days, the foolish bullet wound from 1984 that he still found embarrassing. And Charlene, with her patience and gentle nature, never joked, never judged. She listened as though she were tending to each fragment he handed her. When they decided to marry in 2002, they didn't make it grand. No prior announcement to the press, no invitations to media outlets. Their wedding was so small that if someone asked, "Were any celebrities there?" the answer would probably be, "No need for that." Dusty understood. After so many years living in noise, happiness could only survive in silence. Their marriage was the same, warm, private, steady. They lived in Houston, far from Hollywood, far from New York, far from anything that might pull them into the swirl of glamour. Charlene wasn't just a wife. She was the one who kept Dusty from slipping into the emptiness that sometimes follows touring. She let him give his all to music, but reminded him there was always a home to return to, peaceful dinners waiting, mornings that didn't require stage lights. Dusty had a daughter, Charity Hill, from a previous relationship. Charlene never tried to take the role of mother, but she treated Charity with the respect of someone who understood that every child carries its own fragile corner. When Charity wanted to pursue music, it was Dusty who gently suggested she study law instead, and Charlene who supported that choice from behind the scenes. "She deserves a steadier life than her father," Dusty once told his wife, and she nodded because she knew exactly what it meant to be a man exposed to too much spotlight. But every marriage has its trials. For them, the greatest challenge wasn't betrayal or temptation. Dusty was never that kind of man, but health. In his later years, the pain in his hips and shoulders drained him. Some nights he couldn't stand, and Charlene was the one who helped him out of bed. Some mornings, he woke with his face twisted in pain, and Charlene stayed silent, holding his hand so he wouldn't feel weak. Dusty hated hospitals, hated doctors, hated the idea of being a burden. But in a twist of fate, the more his body weakened, the stronger their love became. Charlene often said, "As long as you can stand on that stage, I'm happy." And when he finally had to stop touring, she was the only one who saw the heartbreak in the way he looked at his bass resting in the corner, a sadness of someone who knew he was losing a piece of his soul. On his last night, he went to bed like any other. No complaints, no mention of pain. Charlene said he even smiled when she wished him good night. Then, the next morning, Dusty didn't wake up. A peaceful ending that hurt unbearably. Peaceful because he left in the arms of the only person he fully trusted. Heartbreaking because even in death, he chose silence, just like he had his whole life. For Charlene, that loss wasn't the death of a legendary bassist. It was losing her soulmate, a man of few words who loved her in the deepest way possible. Through presence, through quiet evenings together without speaking, through the hand he held tightly even in pain, trying to appear calm. And looking back, the world finally understands. If ZZ Top was a ship that sailed for 50 years without losing rhythm, then Charlene was the one who kept Dusty, the most silent engine, burning steady. A love not flashy, not loud, but irreplaceable. A woman who quietly carried Dusty Hill through the final chapters of his life with a tenderness untouched by time. Dusty Hill's legacy was never built on explosive moments, never on solos that brought arenas to their feet, and never on the image of a stage front leader. He never wanted to be the hero of any song. What he wanted, and what he devoted his entire life to, was keeping the rhythm from ever slipping. And that unwavering consistency became a quiet but irreplaceable legacy in the history of rock. For more than 50 years with ZZ Top, Dusty shaped a rare archetype, the foundational artist. In an industry obsessed with whoever stands in the spotlight, he chose to stand behind it, ensuring everything ran perfectly. His bass lines never sought attention, but they carried the invisible pulse that kept the entire band steady. From Grange, sharp, dressed man, gimme all your lovin', to Tush, his deep, tight, almost instinctual bass became the backbone of every arrangement. Bass players who came after him, from bar musicians to veteran rock artists, learned a lesson Dusty had lived his whole life. Sometimes simplicity is the greatest power. But Dusty's influence wasn't limited to music. He helped shape the entire image of ZZ Top, one of America's great pop culture brands. The long beard, the dark sunglasses, the calm stance, the stylish shoulder shuffle in their MTV videos, those became defining symbols of the 1980s. They didn't just conquer MTV, they used it to carve themselves into the visual memory of millions. No one would have imagined that three long-bearded Texans would become icons of the music television era, yet they did. And Dusty was one of its key cornerstones. Among musicians, Dusty was respected for something incredibly rare: absolute loyalty. He stayed with Billy Gibbons and Frank Beard for half a century without leaving the band even once. No solo projects, no pursuit of personal limelight, no spiraling into the internal conflicts that define rock history. That steadfastness helped make ZZ Top one of the most stable lineups in modern music, and that achievement bears Dusty's fingerprints. ZZ Top also became a masterclass in music marketing, thanks to the way they hijacked the MTV era without losing their identity. And at the center of that lesson, Dusty Hill was the embodiment of authenticity, the reason audiences believed in them. People may not remember every bass note he played, but everyone remembers his silhouette beside that blazing red Eliminator car, his eyes hidden behind black lenses, his beard drifting slightly in the wind. He became woven into the American cultural code, appearing in advertising, films, animation, even video games. Even after his passing, Dusty's bass still resonates in every ZZ Top performance. Billy Gibbons once said, "Dusty never wanted us to stop. Let the show go on." That was his final request. And that sentence became a part of his emotional legacy, a declaration of devotion no artist can fake. Elwood Francis, the man Dusty chose to take over the bass, did not replace him. He simply carries the flame Dusty left behind. Every time Elwood plays the deep grooves of Grange, Tush, or Got Me Under Pressure, the crowd feels Dusty Hill still there, like a gravitational pull keeping everything aligned. Dusty Hill left the stage of life so gently that people only realized the emptiness when the music suddenly felt like it was missing. Something they couldn't name. Not the bass tone, not the long beard or the sunglasses, but the quiet energy he carried for half a century. An energy that kept the band's heartbeat steady through changing times and fading spotlight. He didn't create iconic, explosive moments. He created rhythm, the thing that, if lost, sends everything else into chaos. And in his way of living, there is a lesson future generations shouldn't forget. Sometimes a person's greatest value lies in what no one sees. But without it, everything falls apart. If you've ever felt that low-end pulse, if you've ever nodded your head to a ZZ Top groove and felt something deep, subtle, and strangely moving, take a moment to say goodbye to the man who always stood on the left side of the stage, but never once stood on the sidelines of rock history. And if you want to continue discovering the quiet lives that carry entire worlds of strength, just like Dusty Hill, follow us on the journey ahead.